Hi. It's been a bit since I've done a Lunar perspective. After my Dead Games video, which wasn't really one, I've wanted to come back to this. And for this occasion, we're going to be talking about horror games. Don't worry, I will get to the ROM hacks video when I get there. And all my other, dozens of video ideas. Trust me, it takes a lot of time and energy to make these videos, even if it doesn't seem like it. By the way, I just wanted to mention, it's been the year anniversary since the conception of this channel and the entire concept of Lunar Perspective, and it's been such a fun ride. I'm genuinely happy, and thank you all so much for continuing to watch and support my content. I deeply appreciate it, and I can't say that enough. Alrighty, let's move onward to the video. Today's episode of Lunar Perspective will not be focused on one singular game, but instead on several games that I've wanted to talk about, but really can't make up my mind on which one to choose. Of course, given the season, these are all going to be horror themed. Horror games as a medium are beautiful, and I know that they can be divisive, since many people don't quite like getting scared. Me, on the other hand, I love getting chills, I love being scared beyond my wits, and I love experiencing things that move me and change me permanently as a person. So, if you're looking for a spooky game to play this month, maybe one of these will catch your interests. Given the outfit I'm wearing, I'm sure you can already guess one of the games on the list, so let's get out of the way immediately. Lethal Company. Lethal Company isn't what I would call a traditional horror game. Far from it, I would call it a party horror game. Now, if you've somehow been living under a rock and don't know what Lethal Company is, I'm very surprised. Do you even have friends? Lethal Company is a co-op experience in which you and multiple other players collect scrap and survive against monsters to meet a quota. And in that process, many, many, many silly things happen. Many very comedic and silly events happen, such as randomly tripping landmines, getting your ass absolutely blasted by a thumper, or many of the other horrors that lurk inside the buildings. Lethal Company is a very solid game, and very cheap too. I have put over hundreds of hours into this game. It is a real gem of a co-op game, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who's looking for a fun experience to play with friends. And even to non-horror fans, it's a really good game. The game still receives small and large updates occasionally, ranging from new monsters, new items, and whatever the hell else Zeekers decides to throw in. There's also a big modding scene for this game. If you do get bored with the base game, which will take a very long time, you can download hundreds of mods to change up the gameplay drastically. If I was given a choice to play Phasmophobia or Lethal Company, I am 100% choosing Lethal Company. While Phasmophobia is good in its own right, I think Lethal Company does something way better with the co-op horror genre. I would highly recommend it. Plus, it just had its 1-year anniversary in early access. So please, do check it out. It is one of my favorite horror games, and generally one of my favorite games to play with friends. Alright, let's move on to the next topic of the video. One that I feel that does not get enough praise. Faith. Faith is a 2D horror game by Airdorf that pays homage to retro consoles like the Atari 2600 with its limited fidelity and primitive soundscape. Despite this creative choice, Faith often breaks its boundaries to increase the horror, with things like full rotoscope cutscenes of the various demons you will encounter to full-blown industrial noise soundscapes. Faith takes place in the year 1987, just 1 year after an exorcism at the Martin family home went horribly wrong. You are placed into the shoes of Father John Ward, one of the two priests who went to exorcise the demon out of the Martin family's daughter, Amy Martin. The exorcism was a complete failure, leaving John as the only survivor and Amy still possessed by the demon. After what took place in the Martin home, John was forced into psychiatric care for his mental instability and under the suspicion that he murdered the Martin family. Now John is coming back to the home to finish what was started and prepares himself for whatever horrors await him in that house. Unfortunately, John will have to worry about a lot more than just Amy Martin. As John travels around the area, he is constantly and actively pursued by another demon, a pale figure named Michael Davis. Michael will constantly rush towards John, and John's only option to defend himself is with a cross. Holding out the cross will repel any manner of evil that may try to cause any bodily harm to John. However, if you're not quick enough on the draw, yes, that is correct. You die in exactly one hit from everything in the game. John is extremely vulnerable and slow compared to the demons that want him in the ground. However, your cross is just enough to help you continue surviving. Throughout the game, you will pick up notes that help build the world around you, along with detailing the past and its characters, allowing you to create a web of lore to piece everything back together in the overarching story, which, trust me, you're going to need if you want to know everything. After enough exploration, John finally finds his way back to the Martin home and encounters Amy there, waiting for him. I would love to go further in depth with the game, but I'd rather leave it up to you, the viewer, to go and experience it. Faith is a story that I don't want to spoil because the game's writing is utterly fantastic, with plenty of room for discussion and interpretation. Besides, I was only talking about a fraction of Chapter 1. There are 3 entire chapters, each one longer than the last, and a 4th one coming out sometime in the future. I seriously love Faith and would recommend it to anyone who's looking for a horror game to play this year. Especially a good game if your system isn't quite up to specs. I can't wait to see what Erdorf does in the future. Alrighty, that's 2 games out of the way. And I still have a few more to talk about. Taking a step away from indie horror games, let's fixate our lens to something much more contemporary. It's a title that I'm sure you don't need me to tell you about. The Silent Hill 2 Remake. I'm sure that anyone watching this has heard non-stop discussion about the Silent Hill 2 Remake and about Blooper Team. Now, as someone who tried to keep a neutral stance on it with some cautious optimism, I can firmly say that the remake was pretty amazing, but I'm not actually going to be going into depth with it today. Instead, I'm going to tell you to go play a different Silent Hill game. That game being Silent Hill 3. Silent Hill 3 is one of my favorite Silent Hill games for many reasons, and it's so difficult to fully articulate why that is, especially without entering into massive spoiler territory. But let me do what I can without revealing too much about the game. Silent Hill 3 places you in the role of Heather, a young teenage girl who has been experiencing strange nightmares, who suddenly finds herself being pursued by some unknown force for reasons beyond her understanding. Along the way, she will encounter new friends and foes alike, as she discovers the truth about her past and her identity. As a side note, I should say that the full impact of Silent Hill 3 can't be experienced without having played the original Silent Hill, but I think, personally, even on its own, Silent Hill 3 is a spectacular game in the survival horror genre, and an all-time PS2 classic. The music, the atmosphere, the style, it's all just perfect. The game means a lot to me too, and my own personal interpretations have cemented into my heart as one of my favorite horror games ever. Survival horror is a genre that I find to be hit or miss, but Silent Hill's style of it is one that I am deeply fond of. Plus, I think if you've never played a Silent Hill game before, this one is a perfect gateway to get into the franchise. There are tons of amazing stories that the series has. Each one will knock you off your feet, and Silent Hill 3 is, in my opinion, the best one in the series. I know I haven't really discussed the contents too deeply with the game, and just have been praising it, but I would love for you to go in near completely blind if possible. I cannot possibly encourage people to play it enough. However, Silent Hill 3 isn't my #1 recommendation to play this year. That title goes to a game that was inspired by the Silent Hill series, one that I believe a few of you might already be vaguely familiar with. Signalis. Oh boy. I've been wanting to talk about this game for a very long time, and the desire to turn this into a full Luna perspective on it right now is eating me up. Signalis was developed by Rose Engine, who is comprised of Yuri Stern and Barbara, with a soundtrack done by musician Thousand Eyes and Cicada Sirens. To say the game was inspired by Silent Hill would be underselling the true scope and beauty of Signalis. There are so many threads of inspiration that are weaved beautifully throughout the game. The end product supersedes its inspirations and becomes something new entirely. If you're observant enough, you can see so many of these inspirations, from Silent Hill, Lovecraft, Evangelion, to David Lynch, and so much more. The best way I can describe Signalis is a game that is an inspiration stein. The echoes of its creative choices can be felt everywhere in its writing, aesthetic, music, and gameplay. This semblance culminates into an utterly immaculate game that I believe is one of the best pieces of horror media to come out in the last decade. But it wasn't always like this. Signalis' development time goes back far further than most would expect, having prototypes in 2014 through 2016, where it originally was more similar to a side-scroller Metroidvania with horror elements, something I'm personally thankful they didn't stick with. Signalis didn't even really find its identity until years later, where it would be first revealed in 2018. And even then, despite coming much closer to its final vision, it was still far from the story and characters we have now. It wasn't until a few more years in development that Signalis would become the game it is today, with a radically different story and characters. Signalis takes place in the far future, where society has transformed into a fascist dictatorship under the nation of Yusan. Humanity has colonized the solar system and seeks more. In the technological developments of the future, robots, known as replicas, live and work among civilization, provided with different roles and requirements. When replicas became a part of society, it was important to distinct the two. Humans became an old term. That term evolved into Gestalt. Signalis has you experiencing this world through the eyes of a replica by the name of Elster. Having awoken from cryostasis in a wrecked ship on a frigid and barren planet, she tries to look for her missing co-pilot, Aline Seo, but is ultimately unsuccessful. As such, she takes off to go find her, suiting up and exploring the tundra. The story of Signalis sheds and molts constantly, breaking reality and morphing like a hectic dream. The only way for you to know the truth about everything is to reach the end, where even there, it still won't fully make sense to you. The best way I can describe it is that feeling of amazement and confusement that many people get when finishing games like Off or Silent Hill 2. Games so full of meaning that it requires you to pick through it all again and again to finally get the story. Despite this, some details and things are just left to interpretation, with no definitive answer. And that is part of what I personally think makes Signalis such a beautiful story. Almost everyone has different interpretations of the story and its setting, and the discussions I have seen have been so thought-provoking and fun. It's why for the last 2 years, I haven't been able to remove this game from my head. It's latched onto my brain, and I've never ever truly forgotten about it. It's almost always there in the back of my mind. When I first started Signalis, I never expected it to change me forever. But that's just the power of indie games now. They're capable of so many different things and evoking a wide range of feelings. Signalis is just going to be remembered as one of the best indie games ever made, and I wholeheartedly believe that. As much as people praise Silent Hill 2 for being the best horror game, I know that people will hold Signalis in the same reverence. It's genuinely, and I'm not going to use this word lightly, art. The horrors of Signalis creep in as you start the game, with its unsettling title screen of an eye staring you down. The backing music is a perfect match for the aesthetic. Anytime I hear this theme now, I'm filled with goosebumps as I'm shot through with memories of the game. You begin the game in the empty Penrose ship, a vessel that was destined to find new planets for the nation to colonize. However, be it fate or unfortunate circumstances, it has crashed and is no longer operable. Awakening from cryostasis, Ulster goes to immediately look for her Gestalt. Things are not quite right as we find bloody notes and defective doors. We do reach the control panel of the ship, where we see through the frozen over windows that there is snow and nothingness ahead. Grabbing a photo off the controls, we use the code on its back to open our Gestalt's cryopod. This is where Alina Seo should be, but alas, she's missing. In her place, a damaged keycard to the airlock is left. This area serves as the tutorial, as we are taught the basics of items, such as examining and combining. It's simple and effective for helping you understand the fundamentals. But now, having found the tapes to repair the keycard, we move to the airlock room and prepare to depart onto the frozen planet in an attempt to find our Gestalt. Another thing Signalis does wonderfully is its cinematics and first-person segments. They are some of my favorite sections in the entire game, and are always a welcome sight. Traveling through the snowy wasteland, we come across a giant black gate, leading us into a dark hole in the earth, with what you could barely call a staircase spiraling down. Descending into the pit, we find yet another hole, this time with a red light at the end. Given no other option, we crawl. Despite what was believed to be a lifeless and empty planet, this room somehow exists, with a tarnished flag of the nation of Yusan. What catches our eye the most is a tome laying on the table, The King in Yellow. The book calls to you, and upon picking it up, this immaculate cutscene plays, which foreshadows the nature and horror of the journey ahead. If there was any reason to recommend Signalis to anyone, the intro is a pretty good taste for what's to come. I don't want to go further into detail beyond this, and I would rather let you go in and experience what this absolute gem has to offer. Trust me, you won't regret it. Signalis is, and will likely be, one of the greatest indie horror experiences you can get. Alrighty, let's begin wrapping up this video. I know this wasn't a long Lunar perspective, and was a cursory glance at a few horror games. I will do my best to make sure the next one is a long Lunar perspective, and only on one specific game. As of right now, many of the games mentioned here today are currently on sale, so please, do go out and give them a try. I promise, at least one of them will tickle your fancy, if you're a fan of horror. And if you're not the biggest fan of horror games, then Lethal Company and Signalis are still a huge recommendation from me. I wanted to say thank you all again for your continued support over this last year, from all of my friends and viewers. It means so much to me, because I've never been happier before in my entire life. I never ask for anyone to like my videos, or to subscribe. In truth, I believe if I have to ask people to do that, then my work isn't good enough. It's not good enough on its own merits to win people over. And I'm not going to ask you to do that today. Instead, all I ask from you is to check out one of these amazing titles. Thank you everyone for your support. I'll see you all on the next Lunar Perspective, sometime sooner or later. May the moon always shine for you.